Welcome to today's true crime story, a tale of love, passion, and dark jealousy that led to an unimaginable tragedy. Behind the walls of what seemed like a perfect suburban home, a dangerous secret was quietly growing. What began as an adventurous journey slowly turned into a nightmare. In this video, we'll uncover the collapse of Hayden and Emily Dawson's marriage, a relationship that started with love but ended in pain and death. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you won't miss any upcoming episodes of thrilling true crime stories. Now, let's explore the gripping details behind the Dawson case, a story that will make you question whether you truly know the people you love. In the peaceful neighborhood of Crestwood Heights, the Dawson residence stood as a symbol of suburban perfection. To the outside world, Hayden and Emily Dawson seemed like the epitome of a happy, successful couple. Their well-manicured lawn, luxurious two-story house, and frequent weekend barbecues made them the envy of their community. Neighbors would often marvel at how well the Dawsons complemented each other. Hayden, a rising star in the tech industry, and Emily, a freelance graphic designer with a vibrant personality and infectious laugh. Together, they had built a life that appeared picture perfect. Hayden's driven and charismatic demeanor was matched by Emily's artistic flair and laid-back attitude. They had met in college, instantly attracted to one another's contrasting personalities. Hayden, with his sharp intellect and ambitious goals, had been drawn to Emily's carefree spirit and creative mind. Their whirlwind romance led to a beachside proposal within a year of graduation, and soon after, they were married in a lavish ceremony that all their friends and family couldn't stop talking about. For the first several years of their marriage, life seemed blissful. They traveled extensively, enjoyed successful careers, and turned their home into a sanctuary of beauty and comfort. But as they entered their mid-30s, a subtle restlessness crept into their relationship. The once passionate romance had mellowed into something more predictable, comfortable but lacking the intensity they had once shared. It was Emily who first voiced the desire for change. Always the more adventurous of the two, she suggested they explore new avenues to reignite the spark in their relationship. At first, it was simple, attending workshops on tantric practices and experimenting with BDSM. These initial explorations opened the door to deeper, more honest conversations about their fantasies and desires. Emily felt liberated by the newfound openness between them, and Hayden, ever eager to please his wife, followed her lead, convinced that this new chapter could bring them closer together. But it wasn't long before the idea of swinging consensual non-monogamy surfaced in one of their late-night conversations. Emily had read about it online and was intrigued by the idea of exploring sexual freedom with other couples while maintaining their emotional bond. Hayden was hesitant at first, but as Emily painted a picture of excitement, intimacy, and shared adventure, he began to warm to the concept. After months of research, discussions, and soul-searching, the Dawsons decided to take the plunge. They crafted profiles on discreet swinger websites, attended meet-and-greet events, and soon found themselves immersed in a world they had never imagined. At first, the experiences were exhilarating. Hayden and Emily reveled in the attention and sexual energy of their new lifestyle, convinced that it had breathed new life into their marriage. Little did they know, beneath the surface of this thrilling new world, darker forces were at play, forces that would soon turn their lives upside down. With their decision made, Hayden and Emily took their first tentative steps into the world of swinging. They started by creating a discreet profile on an exclusive website for couples seeking similar adventures. Every step felt exhilarating yet nerve-wracking. There was an undeniable sense of excitement, but also a growing tension. After weeks of exchanging messages with other couples, they were invited to a meet and greet at a local upscale bar. That night, as they entered the dimly lit venue, Hayden's heart pounded in his chest. Emily, dressed in a sleek red dress that accentuated her figure, walked confidently beside him, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. The atmosphere in the bar was electric, soft music, intimate conversations, and flirtatious glances exchanged between couples. They met several couples that evening, but one pair stood out, Ether and Nova Sterling. Ether, with his easy smile and magnetic charm, immediately clicked with Emily. Nova, equally charismatic and confident, made Hayden feel surprisingly at ease in this unfamiliar world. The four of them quickly became friends. Dinner dates and casual get-togethers soon evolved into something more intimate. Hayden, though hesitant at first, found himself drawn to the allure of this new lifestyle. The shared excitement, the thrill of pushing boundaries, it was intoxicating. For a while, it seemed as though the swinging lifestyle had given their marriage a renewed sense of passion. Hayden enjoyed the attention he received from other women, and Emily's confidence soared as she embraced her sexuality in ways she never had before. But as they grew more comfortable, the dynamics began to shift. Emily's flirtation with Ether grew more frequent, and Hayden couldn't ignore the lingering glances they exchanged. What had started as harmless fun now sparked a quiet storm inside Hayden. He couldn't shake the growing discomfort that simmered beneath the surface. Despite his unease, Hayden kept his concerns to himself. He didn't want to seem jealous or possessive, especially since it was Emily who had pushed them into this lifestyle. He forced himself to smile through the discomfort, convincing himself that this was what kept their marriage alive. As the weeks went by, the Dawsons and the Sterlings became a regular fixture at swinging parties. These gatherings, held at private homes or upscale clubs, were glamorous and full of sensual energy. Yet, with every encounter, Hayden's feelings of jealousy and insecurity deepened, no matter how hard he tried to suppress them. The sight of Emily with Ether began to gnaw at him, and the more he pretended everything was fine, the more he felt his grip on their marriage slipping. What had started as a quest to reignite passion now threatened to unravel everything. At first, Hayden tried to bury his feelings, rationalizing them as just part of the swinging experience. He reminded himself that this was a consensual choice, a way to keep their marriage exciting, open, and free from the monotony that had begun to creep into their lives. But no matter how hard he tried, the seed of jealousy took root deep within him, and it began to fester. Emily, on the other hand, seemed to flourish. She reveled in the attention she received from men like Ether, her confidence growing with every flirtatious exchange and lingering touch. Hayden couldn't deny the physical attraction he still felt for her. Their own sexual encounters had become more passionate, more frequent, but there was a nagging discomfort each time he saw Emily's connection with Ether deepen. What bothered Hayden the most wasn't just the physical aspect, it was the emotional intimacy he sensed growing between them. He noticed the way Emily's laughter came more easily when Ether was around, how their inside jokes created a bond that Hayden felt increasingly excluded from. While the swinging lifestyle had initially brought him and Emily closer, it now felt like it was slowly pulling them apart. He would lie awake at night, replaying scenes from the parties in his mind, how Emily's eyes lit up when she looked at Ether, how their conversations seemed more personal, more meaningful than anything he and Emily had shared recently. Hayden began to question everything. Was this still just about sex? Or had Emily started to develop real feelings for Ether? As the tension built inside him, it began to spill over into their everyday life. He started making passive-aggressive comments, disguised as jokes, about her interactions with Ether. "You two seem pretty close," he'd say with a forced smile, trying to keep his tone light but unable to hide the bitterness. Emily would laugh it off at first, but over time, the tension between them became impossible to ignore. Emily, sensing Hayden's unease but unsure how to address it, tried to reassure him. "You know this is just for fun, right? It's just physical," she'd say, hoping her words would ease his growing anxiety. But no matter how often she reassured him, Hayden couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was happening. Soon, even the thrill of their own encounters began to fade for Hayden. What once excited him now felt tainted by the constant presence of Ether in their lives. He started to resent the way Emily always seemed to gravitate toward him at every party, every gathering. The laughter that once made him fall in love with her now only reminded him of how disconnected they had become. His jealousy, once a silent whisper, grew louder with each passing week. It followed him at work, haunted him in the quiet moments of the day, and turned every interaction with Emily into a minefield of unspoken tension. He found himself checking her phone when she wasn't looking, scanning through text messages and emails for any sign that his worst fears were true. While he didn't find any explicit betrayal, every innocuous message exchanged with Ether only fueled the storm brewing inside him. Emily, caught up in the excitement of their new lifestyle and blinded by her belief that everything was still fine, failed to see how deeply Hayden was spiraling. She continued to believe that swinging had strengthened their marriage, unaware that it was now unraveling right in front of her. As Hayden's jealousy grew, so did the cracks in their relationship. What had started as an adventure in trust and openness was quickly turning into a toxic cycle of suspicion, resentment, and frustration. And while Emily remained oblivious to the extent of Hayden's inner turmoil, the tension between them was building towards something that neither of them could control. The breaking point came one evening after a party hosted by the Sterlings. Hayden had spent most of the night watching Emily from a distance, his mind simmering with thoughts he could no longer control. Ether was by her side the entire night, their laughter and whispers becoming more than just background noise. Hayden could see the way Emily's hand lingered on Ether's arm. Hayden tried to bury his smiles they exchanged, rationalize, and it gnawed at him like never before. As they drove home, the tension between them was palpable. Emily sat quietly in the passenger seat, her head resting against the window, unaware of the storm raging inside Hayden's mind. Every glance she had shared with Ether replayed in his head, each one twisting the knife of jealousy deeper into his chest. By the time they arrived home, Hayden couldn't hold back any longer. The moment the front door closed behind them, the facade of calm shattered. "Do you think I'm blind?" Hayden's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Emily turned to face him, startled by the intensity in his tone. "Do you think I don't see what's going on between you and Ether?" Emily's eyes widened in surprise, and then anger. "What are you talking about?" she shot back, her voice rising. "There's nothing going on, Hayden. You're being ridiculous." "Ridiculous?" Hayden's voice shook with a mixture of hurt and rage. "I saw the way you were with him tonight. You're practically glued to his side. How long has this been going on? Are you two meeting behind my back?" Emily's expression turned from defensive to incredulous. "You're out of your mind," she snapped. "Ether and I are friends, just like we agreed. This whole thing was your idea too. I thought we were on the same page, but apparently, you've been festering in this jealousy, haven't you?" Her words only added fuel to the fire. Hayden's emotions spiraled out of control as his jealousy, long repressed, burst to the surface. "Don't act like you're innocent," he yelled, his voice cracking. "I know what's going on, Emily. I'm not stupid." Emily stepped forward, her own anger flaring. "This is insane. You're making things up because you can't handle your own insecurities. I've been honest with you, and now you're throwing that in my face." The argument escalated, their voices echoing through the house. Hayden, consumed by jealousy, couldn't stop himself. Every word Emily said felt like a personal attack, each accusation pushing him closer to the edge. Suddenly, in a fit of blind rage, Hayden grabbed Emily's arms. His grip was rough, too tight, and Emily gasped in pain, her eyes wide with shock. "Let go of me," she cried, struggling to break free. But Hayden, driven by the fear of losing her, couldn't see reason. He shoved her back, harder than he intended. Emily stumbled, her foot catching on the edge of the rug. Time seemed to slow as she fell backward, her arms flailing in a desperate attempt to regain her balance. But there was nothing to stop her fall. Her head struck the corner of the coffee table with a sickening crack, the sound echoing through the room like a death knell. Hayden froze, his breath catching in his throat as he watched Emily crumple to the floor, motionless. Blood began to pool beneath her head, staining the pristine white carpet. For a moment, Everything was silent, except for the sound of Hayden's ragged breathing. Panic surged through him as the reality of what had just happened hit him like a tidal wave. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands trembling as he reached out to touch her face. "Emily," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Emily, wake up, please." But there was no response. The woman he had loved for so long, the one he had shared his life with, lay lifeless before him. In a single moment of uncontrolled anger, Hayden had destroyed everything. The early morning light filtered through the blinds as the sound of sirens shattered the stillness of Crestwood Heights. Neighbors gathered outside the Dawson residence, their faces filled with a mix of curiosity and dread as the flashing red and blue lights reflected off their windows. Word spread quickly that something terrible had happened, and before long, the quiet street was swarmed with police cruisers and an ambulance. Inside the house, Detective Fiona Harper, a seasoned investigator with a sharp mind and an unerring sense for uncovering hidden truths, stepped through the front door. The scene before her was a stark contrast to the calm, well-manicured exterior of the Dawson home. The living room was a chaotic mess of overturned furniture, shattered glass, and, at the center of it all, Emily Dawson's lifeless body lying in a pool of blood. Her head had struck the corner of a coffee table, leaving a gruesome wound that made even the most hardened officers avert their gaze. Harper's eyes narrowed as she took in the scene. Something didn't add up. It wasn't just the violence of the scene, but the eerie stillness that followed. She had seen countless domestic disputes gone wrong, but there was something different about this one. The husband, Hayden, sat on the edge of the couch, his face buried in his hands. His shirt was stained with Emily's blood, his eyes red from crying. But Harper noticed something else. His face bore fresh scratches, thin red lines along his cheek and neck, as though he had been in a struggle. As forensic teams began their work, Harper approached Hayden cautiously. "Mr. Dawson, I need you to walk me through what happened tonight," she said, her voice firm but calm. Hayden lifted his head, his expression a mix of shock and exhaustion. "It was an accident," he whispered hoarsely. "We had a fight, things got out of hand. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Tell me about the fight," Harper pressed, her instincts telling her there was more to the story than he was letting on. Hayden hesitated, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "We were arguing, about everything. Ether, the swinging, it all just exploded. I tried to calm her down, but she fell. I swear I didn't push her, she just fell." Harper nodded, making mental notes, but something in Hayden's story felt rehearsed, almost too controlled. "And the scratches on your face? How did those happen?" Hayden's hand instinctively went to his cheek, his eyes widening slightly. She hit me. We were fighting, and she clawed at me. I wasn't thinking straight. I was just trying to hold her back." As he spoke, Harper noticed how he avoided looking at Emily's body, as if seeing her lifeless form would make it all too real. Harper's gut told her there was more to this than a simple accident, and the more she listened, the more her suspicions grew. Over the next few days, Harper and her team worked tirelessly to piece together the events leading up to that fateful night. They began with interviews with neighbors, friends, and colleagues. Slowly, a darker picture of the Dawsons' marriage began to emerge. The couple, once considered the picture of perfection, had been living a double life, hiding deep cracks beneath their polished surface. Interviews with friends from the swinging community revealed that tensions between Hayden and Emily had been escalating for months. Many described how Hayden's jealousy had become more apparent, especially when it came to Ether Sterling. One witness mentioned seeing Hayden watching Emily and Ether at a recent party, his eyes filled with barely concealed rage. The detectives also uncovered digital evidence, text messages and emails between Emily and Ether that painted a more complicated picture of the situation. In one exchange, Emily had expressed her frustrations with Hayden's growing possessiveness. In another, she had hinted at her plans to leave him, a revelation that threw a potential motive into sharp focus. Forensic analysis of the crime scene only deepened Harper's suspicions. The angle and force of Emily's fatal injury didn't align with a simple fall. There were signs of a struggle, bruises on Emily's arms, defensive wounds on her hands, and most damningly, skin cells beneath her fingernails that matched Hayden's DNA. These details painted a far more violent picture than Hayden's account of an accidental fall. As the evidence mounted, Harper brought Hayden back in for questioning. This time, the interrogation was relentless. Under the pressure, cracks began to appear in his story. He stumbled over details, contradicted himself, and finally, in a moment of desperation, admitted to the fight but continued to insist that Emily's death was a tragic accident. But Harper knew better. With every piece of evidence that surfaced, it became clear that Hayden's jealousy had driven him to a breaking point. The heated argument, the physical altercation, the fatal shove, it all pointed to one inevitable conclusion: Hayden Dawson had not only killed his wife in a fit of uncontrollable rage, but he had tried to cover it up as an accident. As the investigation reached its climax, Detective Harper prepared to present her case to the district attorney. The truth was undeniable: what had started as a passionate exploration of their desires had spiraled into jealousy, violence, and, ultimately, murder. Hayden's carefully constructed life had crumbled, and now, justice was closing in. And in the quiet streets of Crestwood Heights, the once perfect Dawson residence stood as a grim reminder of the dark secrets that can fester behind closed doors. The courtroom was packed on the day Hayden Dawson's trial began. Reporters filled the gallery, eager to cover the story of the picture-perfect couple whose lives had spiraled into murder. The case had gripped the local community, and as the trial unfolded, it became clear that this was more than just a crime of passion. It was the unraveling of a man who had been consumed by jealousy. Prosecutor Andrea Warren wasted no time in laying out the damning evidence. Her opening statement was methodical, painting a vivid picture of the months of tension and jealousy that had plagued Hayden. She spoke of the swinging lifestyle, how it had opened doors that neither Hayden nor Emily were fully prepared to walk through. But more than that, she hammered home the idea that this wasn't just a tragic accident, it was the culmination of Hayden's obsessive jealousy and his inability to control his anger. Warren called witness after witness to the stand, each one revealing more cracks in the Dawsons' supposedly perfect marriage. Nova and Ether Sterling were two of the most crucial witnesses. Nova, with her calm and measured testimony, recounted the party on that fateful night, describing Hayden's brooding demeanor and the escalating tension between him and Emily. Ether's testimony was more emotionally charged, as he admitted to his close friendship with Emily but vehemently denied any romantic involvement. Then came the digital evidence, text messages and emails between Emily and Ether, as well as Emily's private messages to friends, where she had confided her fears about Hayden's growing possessiveness. The jury listened intently as these messages painted a picture of a woman who had felt increasingly trapped in her marriage, desperate to break free but unable to do so. But the most damning testimony came from Dr. Nathaniel Ross, the forensic expert who had analyzed the crime scene. Ross explained, in chilling detail, how the nature of Emily's injuries was inconsistent with a simple fall. The force required to inflict such a fatal wound indicated violence, and the defensive bruises on her arms suggested that Emily had fought back in her final moments. It was this testimony that seemed to sway the jury, as they watched Hayden squirm uncomfortably in his seat. Defense attorney Robert Mathers, knowing the mountain of evidence against his client, attempted to shift the narrative. He argued that Hayden was a victim of circumstances, a man pushed to his emotional limits by the complex emotions that came with their lifestyle. Mathers painted Hayden as a devoted husband who had agreed to the swinging lifestyle only to please his wife, and when things spiraled out of control, it was all just a tragic accident. Mathers' strategy hinged on Hayden's own testimony. When Hayden took the stand, he played the role of the grieving husband, his voice breaking as he described the night of Emily's death. He insisted that he had never intended to hurt her, that the shove had been in the heat of the moment, and that it was never meant to result in her death. For a moment, it seemed like the jury might feel sympathy for him until prosecutor Andrea Warren's cross-examination began. Warren was relentless. She confronted Hayden with the inconsistencies in his story, the scratches on his face, and the overwhelming evidence of his jealousy. She read aloud the messages Emily had sent, detailing her fears and frustrations, and then she forced Hayden to face the undeniable truth: he had killed his wife out of rage, not by accident. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as Warren's questions cut through Hayden's fragile defense. His calm facade cracked, and his anger began to seep through. His voice grew louder, his explanations more frantic, and by the end of the cross-examination, the jury had seen enough. They had seen the man behind the mask, the man who had let jealousy and insecurity destroy his marriage and, ultimately, take his wife's life. After weeks of testimony, the case was handed over to the jury. The courtroom was silent as they deliberated for hours, but it didn't take long for them to reach a verdict. When the foreman stood to deliver the decision, the room held its breath. On the charge of second-degree murder, we find the defendant guilty. The words hung in the air, and Hayden's face turned pale. The judge, in sentencing, spoke of the tragic loss of life and the needless violence that had ended Emily's future. He sentenced Hayden to 25 years to life in prison, a decision that brought some sense of closure to Emily's grieving family and friends, but left the community shaken. In the aftermath, Crestwood Heights would never be the same. The perfect image of suburban bliss had been shattered, revealing the dark secrets that could lurk beneath the surface. The media coverage of the case sparked heated debates about the dangers of jealousy, trust, and the complexities of modern relationships. Many who had once been part of the same swinging circles quietly withdrew, while others became more vocal about the importance of communication and consent in non-traditional relationships. For Detective Fiona Harper, the case had been a grim reminder of how quickly love can turn to obsession, and how easily passion can lead to tragedy. As she closed the file on Hayden Dawson's case, she knew that this story, like so many others, would serve as a cautionary tale, a chilling reminder that beneath the veneer of perfection, darkness can always find a way to surface. Thank you for watching until the end of the video. If you were captivated by this true crime story and want to see more thrilling cases, please hit the like button to support us. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who also loves real-life crime stories and leave a comment below with your thoughts on the case. Be sure to subscribe to the Dark Crime Mysteries channel and turn on notifications to stay updated on the latest gripping cases that you won't want to miss. Thank you for your support.